Something is happening on the Finland-Russia border. But it's not the kind of thing Putin will like. The country was invaded by Russia once during World War II. Now, Putin has frequently mentioned his dreams of a Soviet 2.0 in recent years. However, among all the European countries that fought in World War II, Helsinki and Moscow were the only capitals that were not occupied. And of course, Helsinki was one of the possible targets on Putin's Soviet map. So could Russia try this again in Finland? Think again. Because Finland has been preparing for nearly 86 years to become an impregnable fortress. So, how? Well, let's take a step-by-step look at the present day. At the border, there are concrete walls rising 4.5 meters high, armored units on the move, and military bases being rapidly constructed. F-35 squadrons, HIMARS colonies, and tank units are all ready to combat. It's not just on the surface, the underground is even darker. Thousands of tunnels and shelters stretching for hundreds of kilometers. All of them are being rebuilt, one by one. Helsinki isn't explaining this move as a single event, but as the sum of successive risk signals. Because Russia's hostility toward Finland isn't new, and Finland knows this very well. The question is simple and blunt. If Russia attempts to use the border as a flashpoint again, what impact will Finland's defense response have? And how will Helsinki's moves shape the outcome? To understand this, let us first briefly review history. There is a fact that the Finnish people know very well. In the early days of World War II, the Soviet Union invaded Finland in a campaign now known as the Winter War. Russia historically claims sovereignty over Finnish territory and continues to do so today. This is the fundamental reason why Finland remains cautious toward Russia, and why Russia's ambitions to dominate the Scandinavian countries have never ceased. The first month of the 1939 Finnish-Soviet Winter War was such a disaster for the Soviets that the Finnish Air Force shot down dozens of Russian planes, while ghost-like Finnish ski troops caused havoc among poorly trained Red Army units, leading some Americans to believe that the Finns had won. Soviet losses were far greater than Finland's. But ultimately the Soviet Union had too many troops to effectively defend Finland. A peace agreement was signed, under which Finland ceded 12% of its territory to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union's attempt to conquer Finland during the Winter War was thwarted, and Finland remained an independent country at the end of World War II. The Finnish people have preserved the scars of this war. Today, Finland shares the longest land border with Russia of any European Union country, stretching over 1,300 kilometers, 800 miles. By the 1960s, competition between the United States and the Soviet Union had intensified. From this point onward, the Finns began preparing for any potential attacks, particularly from the Soviet Union. So, how is Helsinki preparing for a potential attack from Russia? The answer lies in a defense package that is broader than the fence itself. Fixed cameras, motion sensors, warning systems, and night lighting form the backbone of this package. The goal is not to prevent illegal crossings, but to make mass and uncontrolled movements manageable. This manageability means the ability to deploy and intervene simultaneously at the border. Finland plans to expand this line to 200 kilometers by the end of 2026. This step can be seen as the official announcement that the border has moved from the era of debordering to the era of rebordering. The technical photograph of the fence becomes clearer when translated into the language of defense planning. The metal posts rise up to 3.5 meters, with a 1-meter-high razor wire loop at the top. Cameras and sensors deployed along the site reduce the burden on patrols. A parallel dirt road has been constructed for rapid access to the site. A combination of loudspeaker announcements and lights has been installed to address sudden crowds at border crossings. Despite current criticism, security authorities maintain that the barrier is necessary for crisis management. The goal is to create a buffer against coordinated flows, not individual persons. This buffer aims to limit the social and economic damage caused by border closures. Helsinki now considers the instrumentalization of migration a security issue, and it is filing measures in this category with justifications that are compatible with European law. The hardening of the border is not just a story of barbed wire, but also an update of the force command architecture. Finland is planning to host a new NATO land headquarters in Mikkeli. The goal is to speed up joint command and control in times of crisis, with the participation of about 50 allied officers. This centre is being designed to work in conjunction with the Finnish Army Command. The plan's cornerstone is the joint management of NATO forces in the event of actual combat. Satellite images of Russian troop movements in the neighboring region confirm the timing of this decision. The threshold is as follows. Local command will not be left alone, and the Allied network will be activated within the first hours. As decision-making times are shortened on the northern flank, plans for the transfer of reinforcements have been put on the table. This scenario means that deterrence will be strengthened not only on the ground but also at the negotiating table. And the message is clear. There will be no command vacuum in the north. Finland is also stepping up its military preparedness in terms of human resources and stockpiles. The reserve force pool is being expanded and the age limit raised. Border troops have adopted a new patrol routine using unmanned reconnaissance and night vision systems. In the army, a modular unit structure is being promoted for emergency tasks. Restrictions on unauthorized flights and enemy UAVs in the airspace have been tightened. Restrictions on the acquisition of Russian-owned real estate in critical areas are reducing intelligence risks. Let's now take a brief look at how the Finnish people are preparing for external attacks. Deep beneath Helsinki's streets lies a detailed network of tunnels and caves, capable of sheltering the city's entire population of 640,000 for months in the event of a nuclear war. The modest entrances to this underground world adorn the city like metro stations, but the ordinary facade belies a darker reality. The primary purpose of this city beneath the city is to serve as large-scale bomb shelters and perhaps even nuclear shelters. These are called civil defense shelters, and there are approximately 5,500 of them in Helsinki alone, but they can be found throughout this Scandinavian country. These shelters can provide protection against conventional bombs. They have water, food, and medicine supplies that can last for weeks, as well as access points to the surface for resupply. To help maintain an airtight environment, they have independent air and water filtration systems, power sources, decontamination facilities, and double blast doors. In addition to hundreds of shelters, Helsinki's 25 metro stations can also be converted into underground shelters capable of holding people for weeks. These measures form a template for Finland's civil-military defense approach. The division of roles between civil authorities and military commanders in times of crisis at the border has been clarified. The constant rhythm of exercises focuses on automating interagency communication. The culture of being prepared for an unexpected day in the northeast has become part of daily routine. Mine stockpiles and mine doctrine have re-emerged as prominent items in Finland's deterrence arsenal. Helsinki and Vilnius have officially initiated the process of withdrawing from the anti-personnel mine treaty. The rationale is simple: to make movement more costly in terrain with high land depth, forests and swamps. This decision also expands the agenda for storage and training during non-combat periods. In times of crisis, the goal is to shape transit corridors and gain time. The impact on civilian areas and the legal dimension will remain sensitive, and plans are being prepared accordingly. Minefields alone do not make sense. They must be combined with trenches, obstacles and fire plans. Coordination with the Baltic Defense Line is becoming even more critical at this point. Thus, the northern Baltic Strip is converging into a counter-mobility network. And this network aims to make rapid and deep attacks costly. In the air power file, Finland is strengthening its detection and kill chain with the procurement of F-35s. New generation radars and network-centric architecture enable an earlier picture of the northern airspace. Early warning and electronic attack capabilities give time to defense lines on the ground. Air-ground sensor sharing speeds up command decisions in response to anomalies detected at the border. This speed multiplies the benefits of the chain stretching from the wire sensor line to base command. Air-ground integration enables the creation of a wide area of influence even with limited forces on the ground. The critical point is maintaining the balance between surprise and sustainability at the same time. If the F-35's maintenance cycle proceeds as planned, flight days will remain stable. Stability will directly reflect on the patrol and reaction times of ground forces. And this framework will be decisive for achieving superiority in the first hours on the northern front. Finland interprets the situation on the Russian front as the reactivation of bases in the immediate vicinity. Satellite images also show movement of depots and barracks behind the border. Helsinki classifies this as a medium-term trend rather than a short-term threat. The trend is characterized by the build-up of forces in the Leningrad region and the use of short-range pressure tactics. Finland's response is to mitigate the risks of sudden build-up and tactical raids through procedures. These procedures bring border units, gendarmerie and civil crisis management under the same plan. Which institution will lead and which resources will be allocated at each crisis level is already written down. This eliminates delays in decision-making. Once decision delays are eliminated, deterrence is measured in minutes, and those minutes become the most valuable resource along a border. The Arctic and high north are seen as Finland's second front, stretching from its land border to the sea ice. Climate and geography here are not tactical but strategic determinants. Cold weather increases technical risks, from battery life to fuel chemistry. Training is therefore not just physical, but also involves testing materials and procedures. NATO forces are pushing endurance thresholds with months-long exercises under these conditions. Scandinavian armies are sharing their expertise as local masters of this environment. The goal is not to guarantee technology, but to guarantee that technology works. Thus, the line stretching from land to sea is linked to a single defense concept. And against Russia's Arctic experience, a multinational resilience policy is being developed. This policy aims to keep the silence of the north closed to surprises. Finland's fence line should be read in conjunction with the permanent defense architecture initiated by the Baltics. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are establishing a counteraction infrastructure called the Baltic Defense Line. The plan consists of trenches, dragon's teeth, obstacle fields, and permanent positions. The goal is not to stop the attack, but to draw it into a desired corridor and gain time. This would allow local forces to manage the engagement until NATO reinforcements arrive. This line expands the idea of a joint defense geography rather than individual countries. The political message is also clear. No easy passage corridor will be expected anymore. The first projects have begun at the construction site level, and tests are being conducted in the field. Despite cost and ownership issues, the direction has reversed. And this reversal sends a message to Moscow that there is no speed, only friction. Meanwhile, images of concrete excavation work have been published in Estonia. Official sources have shared images of anti-tank trenches being dug in the southeastern section. The first prototype tests of trench clusters and concrete barriers have been conducted. The goal is to integrate engineering outputs with unit tactics within the same plan. Every prototype deployed to the field generates lessons in maintenance, resupply, and camouflage. These lessons are being updated separately for winter conditions and marshy terrain. Local reserve forces are undergoing simultaneous training in trench operations. The trenches will remain empty in peacetime, but are designed to be filled immediately when needed. This ready but invisible approach balances legality and deterrence, and the spirit of the line focuses on enhancing effectiveness without increasing costs. Latvia describes its border fortifications as a program at the level of the Ministry of Defense. The official framework includes storage areas for obstacle materials and rapid deployment plans. Thus, dragon's teeth and barbed wire barriers can be quickly deployed in the event of a crisis. Open-source documents emphasize that the line will remain unarmed in peacetime. This approach manages international obligations and local security needs together. At the same time, public relations and civil defense training are part of the plan. Local municipalities are involved in the process as stakeholders in route planning. Funding is being sourced from the national budget and potential EU contributions. The overall aim is to establish a delay and diversion network rather than a wall. And this network will be operated not just by one country, but by three. Lithuania is discussing taking the idea of permanent fortifications and multi-layered barriers further. The plan envisages the creation of permanent defense zones along the Belarus and Russia borders. These zones will be supported by trenches, mines, bridge demolition preparations, and logistics hubs. Germany's permanent battalion deployment is strengthening the military backbone. New bases and maintenance areas are ensuring the permanent presence of tanks and armored vehicles. This infrastructure aims to bear the brunt of the first weeks before a NATO intervention. In political terms, the first hours will now be met with a planned and strong response. The depth of the border prevents the line of defense from being confined to a single point. The balance between development and security is being redefined in rural areas, and deterrence works hand in hand with the psychology of a permanent presence. Poland and the Baltic states have also formalized their search for EU funding for this physical defense belt. The goal is to frame the eastern borders as a European project. This means sharing some of the financial burden and harmonizing technical standards. This is why it is important to view Poland's Eastern Shield and the Baltic Line together. The goals are different, but the logic is the same. To close the channels and slow down the attack. A slowing attack buys critical days for NATO reinforcements. Every day gained opens up space for establishing air and artillery superiority. When combined with network and logistical preparedness, these days produce strategic results. And this result is consistent with the doctrine of DETA before it comes, delay when it comes. The NATO reinforcement timeline is the key balancing factor over all these lines. For the Baltic and northern regions, the critical period is the first 48 to 72 hours without losses. These hours are the true test of fortifications and obstacle networks. If the attack can be shaped and slowed down, air and naval reinforcements will arrive in time. Reinforcements that arrive on time force the enemy to maneuver on a wide front and disrupt its supply lines. Thus, the defense psychology is not disrupted without deepening the main battle line. The common language of Finland and the Baltics is based on expanding this window. Joint command centers and exercises increase coordination within the window. As coordination improves, small units can have a big impact. And this impact becomes visible as the true measure of deterrence. And Helsinki is sending this message to those who make the decisions. If you can't win in the first few hours, you can't win the rest of the war. From Russia's perspective, the message is that the window of surprise in the North Baltic axis is narrowing. As the room for surprise narrows, bargaining and show of force lose value. This loss serves the main purpose of deterrence without war. In other words, it becomes possible to influence behavior without pulling the trigger. Looking at the big picture and drawing a single conclusion, we can say the following. Finland is transforming its border from a risk line into a management line. The Baltics are rewriting the terrain as a labyrinth rather than a wall. NATO is adapting its command and reinforcement architecture to this new map. Russia will struggle to find easy openings despite increasing its visibility on the front lines. This balance draws strength not only from military technology but also from administrative discipline. As long as discipline persists, the fence is not just a fence but part of a plan. As long as it is part of the plan, every kilometer, every bunker, and every sensor gains meaning. Every meaningful element is transformed into deterrence. And as deterrence increases, the likelihood of war is pushed off the table from the outset. Thank you for watching.